I've spent an unreasonable amount of time thinking about why certain villains stay with you for years and others evaporate the moment the credits roll. It's not about how evil they are. The most forgettable antagonists in film and television are usually the most cartoonishly cruel ones. The ones who exist purely to be defeated, who have no inner life, who are evil because the plot requires someone to be. They're obstacles dressed up as characters, and the moment they're gone, you don't think about them again. The villains that haunt you are built completely differently. The first thing a great villain needs is a coherent worldview that makes sense on its own terms. Not a worldview you agree with, one that has internal logic you can follow even while you reject it. Thanos is the obvious example because it works so cleanly. His belief that resources are finite and suffering is inevitable without intervention is wrong, but it's not stupid. You can trace the reasoning. You can see how someone who would watch their world collapse could arrive there. The moment a villain's logic becomes followable is the moment they stop being a plot device and start being a person, and that's when they get genuinely unsettling. Contrast that with a villain who is cruel for no reason the story ever bothers to develop. You feel nothing when they lose because you never understood what they were trying to protect or prove. Defeat means nothing without understanding what winning would have meant to them. The second thing is that the best villains believe they are the protagonist of their own story. Magneto doesn't think he's the bad guy. He thinks he's the only one paying attention to what happens to people like him when they trust the wrong systems. He's been proven right before, and he carries that with him into every decision. Walter White doesn't think he's become a monster. He thinks he's finally become himself, finally doing something that matches the scale of what he always believed he deserved. Gus Fring thinks he's building something, protecting something, executing a long plan with discipline and patience. The tragedy in all three cases is that their self-image is not entirely wrong, which is exactly what makes them dangerous. The villain who knows they're the villain and revels in it can work as a specific stylistic choice, Hannibal Lecter, the Joker in certain interpretations, but it requires the writing to be so precise and the performance so controlled that it becomes its own kind of art.
The third thing is that a great villain needs to make the hero's victory feel costly. If the protagonist defeats the antagonist and walks away unchanged, the villain wasn't strong enough. The Joker in The Dark Knight works not because he blows things up, but because he forces Batman into an impossible position where every choice costs something. And the thing it costs him in the end is his belief that people are worth saving without being controlled. The villain leaves a mark. That mark is the point. Light Yagami in Death Note is one of the most sophisticated examples of this because the story treats him as both protagonist and villain simultaneously. And the horror of watching him deteriorate is inseparable from the horror of recognizing how the logic got there step by step. You watched the reasoning. You followed it. And somewhere along the way, you realized you'd been following a monster for 30 episodes without fully noticing when he became one. The fourth thing, and this is the one most writers skip, is specificity of desire. A villain who wants power is boring. Zuko in Avatar wants his father's recognition and his honor restored so badly that he makes catastrophically wrong decisions for 2.5 seasons, and the specificity of that desire is what makes his arc the most emotionally satisfying in the show. Even when he's the antagonist, you understand exactly what he's reaching for and exactly why he can't stop. The last thing is restraint. The greatest villain moments are usually the quietest ones. Hannibal Lecter eating a census taker with fava beans and a nice Chianti is terrifying not because of the imagery, but because of how calm he is describing it. Anton Chigurh asking a gas station owner to call a coin toss is one of the most frightening scenes in modern film, and nobody throws a punch. The villain who controls the room without raising their voice is more threatening than any amount of destruction, because destruction is just power. Control is intelligence. A great villain is not the obstacle between your hero and the ending. They are the argument the story is having with itself about what people are capable of when they stop being accountable to anything outside their own certainty. The hero answers that argument, but the villain has to make it first, and they have to make it well enough that you're not entirely sure who's right until the very end. That doubt is what makes them unforgettable.